Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack complex topics and give you the essential insights you need. Today, we're looking closely at a really significant legal shift in India. On July 1st, 2024, India brought in three new laws, replacing the old colonial-era codes. The Indian Penal Code, the Criminal Procedure Code, and the Evidence Act. These new ones are the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita (BNS), the Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita (BNSS), and the Bharatiya Sakshya Adhiniyam, or BSA. Now, they were presented as this big decisive break from India's colonial legal past. But here's the question we're really digging into. Are these reforms genuinely a step towards decolonization? Or are they maybe more superficial, as one of our key sources, Dr. Ryan Baidya, suggests? That's the mission today, to figure out what these changes actually mean for you, the average citizen in India, day to day.
Yeah, what's really striking when you look at the research, including Dr. Baidya's work, is this contrast. I mean, the laws aim to get rid of that British-imposed structure, that legacy. But the analysis, well, it suggests the fundamental mindset of the justice system, one that's really geared towards control, rather than, say, public service that seems to largely persist. And we'll definitely explore why that distinction, that mindset, matters so much for your experience with the law.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit, because we have heard a lot of noise, a lot of fanfare around these new laws. They even, reduced the number of legal sections, brought in modern offenses like terrorism, cybercrime.
Yeah.
Sounds like a big step, right, on the surface.
Well, if you connect it to the bigger picture from the sources, the reality is, well, it's more nuanced. Despite the new names, some updated language, something like 70% of the old Indian Penal Code actually survives, in substance, in the new BNS. So the hard truth, according to the analysis, is that India's justice system in many ways still treats citizens less like masters of a republic and more like subjects who often have to sort of beg for service, for accountability, for basic dignity.
Right. So what does that actually look like in practice? For someone living in India right now, what does this persistent colonial mindset mean when they interact with the system?
Let's get specific. The sources highlight some really key areas where this old logic, this colonial logic, still seems to be at play. Take police powers and arrests, for instance. Under the old CRPC, Section 41, police could arrest without a warrant for serious offenses, cognizable offenses. The new code, the BNSS, Section 35, it basically continues this power. In fact, some argue it broadens the discretionary language. It lets an officer arrest without an order from a magistrate and without a warrant. And the critical point here is there's not much change in how that discretion is monitored. There are no significant new citizen safeguards built in.
So that power to arrest without a warrant, even with new laws, it's still there, and maybe even wider, with not much more oversight. That feels like a direct line to the past.
Exactly. And it connects to another point, the lack of independent redress. When things go wrong, like custodial deaths or police abuse, the new BNSS sections 174, 176, they still rely on executive-controlled magistrates to order inquiries. Now, these are officials within the executive branch, the same branch overseeing the police. It's not an independent judicial body, and the analysis points out there's no new provision for something like an independent citizen complaints board. So if your rights are violated, you might still be appealing to the very system potentially implicated in the violation to investigate itself.
Yeah, that raises immediate questions about impartiality, doesn't it? What about basic rights when you're actually arrested? Like being told what your rights are?
That's another huge gap the sources highlight. There's no citizen bill of legal rights introduced in these new laws, nothing like the Miranda rights in the U.S. In the States, they have to tell you have the right to remain silent. In India, under the new system, just like the old, police aren't legally obligated to inform you of your rights when you're arrested or during interrogation. So you're often navigating this incredibly stressful situation without even knowing your full legal protections.
Wow. And what about sedition? That was a hugely controversial law. It's gone now, right?
Yeah. Well, repealed is the official word for the old Section 124A. But the spirit of it. According to the research, it seems to have returned. It's under a new name in the BNS, Section 150. The new language talks about purposely or knowingly exciting secession or armed rebellion or subversive activities, but it still uses quite vague terms. And the concern, the critical insight here, is that this vagueness can still allow the state to clamp down on dissent. There's no strong safeguard distinguishing criticism from actual subversion. So you could argue it's a bit like old wine in a new bottle. The state's power to control dissent is potentially maintained.
So the label changed, but the potential for misuse against critics might still be there.
Okay, and what about people actually caught in the system, arrested, waiting for trial? That's a massive issue, the delays. Oh, absolutely. Remand and pretrial detention, it's a huge concern. The new BNSS Section 187 allows police custody, extendable up to 60, maybe even 90 days for investigation. But what's missing, the sources stress, is a clear mandate to justify these long delays or to provide automatic legal aid unless someone specifically asks for it. And the result, you have thousands upon thousands of under trial prisoners, people just waiting. Many are poor, marginalized, stuck in jail for years without even being convicted. The analysis argues this directly violates Article 21 of the Constitution, the right to life and liberty. It's a profound human cost, really.
That's deeply concerning.
Yeah.
Is there anything positive in the New Evidence Act, the BSA?
Yes, there is a notable positive step, particularly regarding sexual assault cases. BSA Section 120, which follows the old Section 114A of the Evidence Act, presumes a lack of consent if the woman states she did not consent. That's a significant legal shift, putting the burden differently.
Okay, that sounds promising.
It is. However, the sources point out a critical gap. There's no accompanying structural reform to ensure evidence collection happens properly. Things like medical exams, witness protection they need to happen within time-bound, citizen-protected protocols. Without that, even with the new presumption, survivors can still face apathy, intimidation, or procedural failures that just derail the whole case.
Right. So even where there's progress on paper, the practical implementation, the systemic support might still be lacking. That's a lot of specific examples where the old problems seem to linger under new names. It really does make you wonder about the day-to-day reality for people, doesn't it?
Precisely. And the research paints this picture of a system where, for the average Indian citizen, just walking into a police station is still something you dread. Filing a basic complaint, an FIR, getting access to medical reports, even securing bail. It often involves intimidation, frustrating delays, or sometimes, needing to make informal payments. Grease money. Police discretion, sometimes abuse of power. It remains widespread despite Supreme Court guidelines trying to curb it. The core issue highlighted is that citizens often find themselves pleading, almost begging, for services that should just be automatic rights in a republic.
So the perception, and maybe the reality, is less public servant, more. Someone wielding power that isn't easily checked.
And that begs the question, who holds them accountable in real time? There isn't a truly independent body that a citizen can easily approach for immediate redress against police misconduct. Power still seems concentrated in the position, in the uniform, not necessarily serving the people.
And this isn't just about the police, is it? The source material talks about a broader issue, systemic corruption.
That's absolutely correct. It goes way beyond just policing. The sources describe justice in India as often being neither swift nor easily accessible. You've got over 50 million cases pending. Trials drag on for years, sometimes decades. Legal aid exists, but it's often ineffective in practice. And tragically, the analysis suggests wealth and influence, not necessarily truth or fairness, can heavily sway case outcomes. And when the system fails, there's no quick, efficient way to hold it accountable. You look at reports like from the National Campaign Against Torture, they documented 1,731 custodial deaths in just 2020. That's nearly 5 people dying in custody every single day.
5 a day. That's staggering.
It is. And Transparency International found over half of Indians reported paying bribes for basic public services back in 2019. So this corruption, this lack of accountability, it isn't confined to police stations. It permeates ministers, politicians, government officials, bankers, even doctors and healthcare facilities, according to the sources. It erodes trust everywhere.
That's a really grim systemic picture. Given these deep-rooted challenges, what can India learn from other places? The sources apparently compare India's system with the US, UK, Japan, Germany, France.
Yes, and this comparison is really revealing for understanding what genuine decolonization might look like in practice. Take citizen rights. India has them in the Constitution, but like we discussed, enforcement can be weak. Rights aren't always clearly communicated. Contrast that with the U.S. Bill of Rights and practices like Miranda warnings they're embedded. The UK has its Human Rights Act, strong common law protections. Germany's Basic Law puts human dignity front and center, and its constitutional court actively protects these rights.
Okay, so stronger enforcement and communication of rights elsewhere. What about police accountability specifically?
That's another key difference. India struggles with custodial violence, corruption, inconsistent reforms. In the U.S., you have internal affairs, external civilian review boards, growing use of body cams attempts at oversight, even if imperfect. The UK has the Independent Office for Police Conduct, IOPC. France has its own Police of Police, the IGPN. Both are designed for independent investigation of misconduct. And Japan and Germany. They're often noted for stricter internal discipline and, crucially, higher public trust, which itself helps foster accountability.
And what about keeping politics out of policing? That seems like a huge issue in India based on the sources.
It really is. Political interference in transfers, promotions, it's described as significant in the Indian context. Compare that to the US, where separation of powers provides some checks. The UK police generally operate with more operational independence. And Japan and Germany are highlighted for having relatively low political or wealthy influence on their police forces, partly due to public trust and strong protocols.
So it's really clear from this comparison that other democracies do have mechanisms, imperfect as they might be, to tackle the very issues India's grappling with: accountability, citizen rights, political interference.
Absolutely. And drawing on this and other analyses, Dr. Baidya's work proposes 5 key structural pillars for what he terms deep reform, going way beyond just swapping out law books.
5 pillars for real change. What's the first one?
The first is quite radical: establishing a 4th branch of government, a Citizen Oversight Authority. The core idea here is creating a completely separate, constitutionally empowered body. Think of it as a police of police, or maybe the Civil Oversight Commission. It would have real teeth. Powers to investigate police and prosecutorial misconduct, audit arbitrary arrests, protect whistleblowers, make binding recommendations, and crucially, it must be insulated from political interference. The proposal details things like merit-based recruitment, its own independent budget, separation from government influence, maybe even its own judicial powers for swift, fair trials of public servants, police, ministers, bankers, everyone.
Wow, a whole new branch of government dedicated to oversight. It's ambitious. What's pillar 2?
Second is a citizen rights charter and mandatory disclosure. This means every police station, every court, would be legally required to display a clear citizens' charter of legal rights. They'd have to inform citizens of their rights at every step, provide digital proof for complaints or FIRs, and face real penalties for not doing so, making rights visible and unavoidable.
Okay, making rights explicit and enforcement mandatory. Pillars 3.
Third, time-bound justice and legal accountability. Basically, putting the clock on the justice system. Introducing legal deadlines for each stage, filing an FIR, submitting a charge sheet, bail hearings, and if deadlines are missed, automatic review, maybe even compensation for delays. Plus, randomized performance audits of police stations and courts to check efficiency. The idea is to tackle that crippling delay we talked about head-on. Justice delayed is justice denied, right? This forces the issue.
Absolutely vital. Okay, number 4.
Fourth is a comprehensive legal aid and compensation framework. Imagine a universal digital portal for accessing legal aid, connecting people with registered advocates. Also, guaranteed state compensation for wrongful arrest, for custodial abuse, or if you're acquitted after a really long trial. And maybe using community service more for minor offenses, easing the load on prisons. It's about making justice accessible, not just a privilege.
Leveling the playing field.
Yeah.
And the 5th pillar.
Fifth, civic re-education of law enforcement. This isn't just about rules, but culture.
Yeah.
Mandatory yearly training for police focusing on their constitutional duties, on citizen dignity, making complaint resolution data public for every officer, every station, building in feedback loops where citizens can actually rate the service they received. It's about shifting that core mindset from control to service.
Those 5 pillars represent a massive overhaul. And the sources also mentioned other specific reforms people want to see.
Yes, beyond those pillars, things like really urgent action on violence against women, maybe making rape a federal offense handled by a special unit, ensuring the Central Bureau of Investigation, CBI, steps in where there's bias or conflict of interest, central government intervention in big cases involving multiple victims to cut through local politics. There was mention of a law specifically to protect Indian history, and also significantly harsher punishments, like 10 times harsher, for public servants who misuse their power compared to ordinary citizens.
So really hitting abuse of power hard.
Exactly. All these proposals taken together, they really point towards a fundamental shift, moving from a culture of ruling over citizens to one of genuinely serving them. It's about redefining that state-citizen relationship.
Which brings us back to the institutions themselves. It's not just the laws, is it? The sources argue the administrative service, the IAS, and the police service, the IPS, have colonial roots that shape them even today, structured for control, not service.
Precisely. And that raises the really big question. Can you have true reform, true decolonization, without fundamentally changing these core institutions? The analysis actually proposes abolishing the current IAS and IPS recruitment systems altogether, replacing them with new independent recruitment bodies focused solely on merit, qualifications, integrity. transparent processes, and a strong emphasis on local recruitment for police to build that crucial community trust.
Wow, abolish and rebuild. That includes things like fixed tenures for officers, right? To insulate them from political pressure.
Yes, fixed tenures, decentralizing power, much stronger accountability through public feedback and regular audits, continuous ethical training. It's a complete reimagining.
The total overhaul, not just tweaking the edges.
Exactly. The core argument emerging from the sources is powerful. You can't just put a new coat of paint on old structures and expect colonial thinking to disappear. India needs to not only rewrite laws, but fundamentally reimagine its institutions to become a true republic of masters, not subjects.
So we've taken a deep dive today into India's big legal changes. We looked at how the new laws aimed for a break from the colonial past. But, as our sources, particularly Dr. Baidya's analysis, suggest, that old mindset control over service seems to persist in many ways, affecting everyday citizens.
Yeah, we saw specific examples. Police powers, the lack of independent checks, how sedition might just be repackaged. These things continue to impact people. We also touched on the huge systemic problems, corruption, the massive case backlogs, and saw how other democracies, try to handle similar issues with stronger accountability and rights protections.
And we explored some really ambitious ideas for genuine decolonization. That police oversight body, the Citizen Rights Charter, time-bound justice, better legal aid, and that fundamental rethink of the IAS and IPS.
Ultimately, the research strongly suggests that changing laws on paper isn't enough. A nation isn't truly free until its institutions are transformed to genuinely serve the people, not rule them.
And that leaves a powerful question for you, the listener. What does it really mean for a nation to be free if its core systems still echo a colonial past? Is changing the legal text sufficient? Or does achieving true justice demand a completely new social contract, one where citizens are, without question, the masters, not the subjects? Something to think about. Thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive.